Welcome to the Fuel Your Life podcast, where we help you find, unleash, and elevate your leadership with John Troutman and Charles Draper. Thank you for listening. We so much appreciate it. Without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Life show. I am John Troutman alongside my good friend and co-host Charles Draper. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? So we're a show now, huh?
Are we not? What do we podcast?
Okay.
Yeah.
I like
Well,
show.
actually, we post mostly on YouTube, so you can be a podcast on YouTube, but it's easier to just say show.
It is. My wife
Yeah.
gets frustrated. I interchange movie and show all the time, and she gets irritated with it. I call movies shows and shows movie. I like just random fun facts.
Yeah. Well,
So
you
how
can
are
interchange this. I'm good, man. Good. I am a couple weeks off spring break and just recovering from that, which was an awesome trip for our ministry. So, yeah. How about yourself?
We're good. We're wide open in the throes of I guess the week of spring break are coming up. Spring break's next week, so it's always busy in the school realm. You know, all the things going on, trying to wrap up stuff. So family's good. Everybody's healthy right now, which I better knock on something. It's exciting. We've hit a couple weeks of everybody being healthy. I'm sure somebody will get a sinus infection with everything blooming next week or so. But we're good, man. Can't complain. Where'd you guys go on spring break?
We went to Washington, D.C., took 11 students. So it was an awesome trip to go to Washington, D.C. and work with some different organizations in the city and doing a lot of different things. But I think our students' favorite was working with an after-school program with some kids in the district. Yeah, it was a great time.
Very good. So you did that. I'm sure you did some other service projects and such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we worked with an organization that partners with several different organizations in the DC area. So we did some gardening one morning. We cleaned homes for people who can't really clean their homes another morning, and then we did the after school program and did a few other things. So it was good. We always think of the political realm when we think of DC, but DC is one of those cities where it's got such a different dynamic. I think what we experienced in South Africa is, maybe not to the same degree, but it's just that dynamic of poverty amidst such wealth and right on top of each other is similar in DC. So it was cool to see our students experience that, especially.
That's neat. And yeah, for those of you that don't know, me and John, we went on this trip to Cape Town, South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
But that area, it's been a while ago. But yeah, you have squatter camps right on top of just the rich of the rich, the metropolitan kind of area. One of the largest malls in the world, right there beside one of the largest squatter camps, which is squatter camps, just where people find a piece of land and live there, and whatever they have, whatever their belongings are, take up whatever space they take up, that's theirs.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just hearing you talk about that is I'm sure, I think about serving others and how sometimes it's easier to serve complete strangers
Mm-hmm.
and people we don't know in need than people right beside of us. I don't know, that was a thought that came to my mind whenever you were talking about that, and just the impact of service that I'm sure you saw.
Yeah. I one thing I love about spring break trips for our ministry, they are one of the biggest weeks of the year, not because of all the planning and the effort that has to go into it, but because of what happens on that week. That week is the week that our students get drawn together. Like, we create a deep bond. You have all the inside jokes, of course, but our ministry really comes together around the spring break trip. Every year that happens. And it's fascinating to your point of, we sit here on campus and we talk all the time about how do we serve, how do we love students, how do we love our campus, how do we love our teachers, and we talk about it all the time, but a student gets into their day-to-day and they just go through it. And a campus minister gets into his day-to-day. Like, I'm not saying that's just students. And so we miss, just because we're just checking the boxes in some ways. What a trip like the spring break trip does for us is it disrupts our normalcy. And then it brings the community rallying around a specific purpose of serving people together. And I was sitting there thinking, because I think organizationally all the time, and like, man, this is so big for us. And I was also sitting here thinking, dude, every organization needs to do this. I thought about you and thought, like, a school, how beneficial it would be for a school to take a day or 2 days, even just in their community, but disrupt the normalcy and go and serve, whether it's their specific community or any other specific community that's a little more underprivileged and just needs somebody to come help. Just show up and do that together. And the bond that's created is unbelievable. I mean, what God does when you just disrupt the normalcy and show up and serve is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's just hard to do. It's hard to do, but.
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes me think back to spring break trips that we took in college whenever we went and served, and just moments. And I don't know, I can remember each trip, and there's certain specific things that I remember. And just thinking about, like, you guys went on that trip with a heart of service. And that was, so, like, there wasn't, like, the priority on that trip was to go and serve. And so, or at least I know that's how we went. I know that's the heart that y'all went with. And so it's also different whenever you enter into a space with just that heart. I'm going to go and serve. I'm here. It's not about me. It's about them. And you end up being blessed tenfold by it. Like we had a community day around here where we just said, let's come clean up the campus over the summer. Organization, what does that look like? And we just came, we pulled weeds, redid beds, put out rock, mulch, different things that need to be done. But the idea about that day was we were just coming to serve together, and that group grew closer. I don't know, there's something powerful about serving beside one another. And even sweating and grinding and hitting obstacles and working through those things for the purpose of serving others, that's just powerful and life-changing. So,
yeah. Hey, let me ask you a question. This is going to seem like a left curveball coming, right at you. What was the Promised Land about?
What was the Promised Land about?
Yeah, if you get this anywhere close to where I'm going, I will be surprised. Okay, let me just answer it so that I can let you off the hook.
Yeah, go for it.
So we read, and when they're leading up to the Promised Land, the Israelites are coming in the Promised Land, and you read over and over again, it's a land flowing with milk and honey. And from our American perspective, it's easy for us to look at that and say, oh, this is a really abundant, lush land, like it's going to be super green. They're coming out of the desert. But from what I've heard about Israel, I've never been. I would love to go, but it's not very green, and it's not very lush, and it's not the best place for growing stuff. You can, but it's not exactly easy. And so it makes you wonder, why would it be considered a land flowing with milk and honey? Why would God be all about this land, where if it was really to be in a lush land, God would have taken Egypt and given that to Israel? Because Egypt had the Nile. I mean, they had irrigation systems set up and everything. Like, they didn't really worry about rain in Egypt. But God took them to Israel instead. And I think part of it is being right on the Red Sea. All trade from every other nation around there. Every nation, I guess, to the east, they would come and flow through Israel. So Israel would be interacting with every other nation, just basically because of their geographic location, they would be interacting with every other nation. And I say that because from the beginning, God called Abraham and said, I'm going to bless you so that you can be a blessing. And we're talking about this service, and to bring this around, I think being in campus ministry that I sit in a place like the Promised Land. And what I mean by that is it's got such a crucial place, a crucial spot in our society where people from all over, students from all over are coming for this short period of time to be on the campus and interact with the different ideologies coming from the campus, whether that's in their classrooms, whether that's through campus ministry or wherever they're finding that. They're interacting with that, and then they're being sent out, usually back to their hometowns, but often sent out to other places. And so we get this short period of time where we get to interact, and we get to stand beside the students and encourage the students and challenge the students, much like the Promised Land. And I would say that even for you, being part of the educational system in our culture, it's often like the Promised Land. The same idea of, hey, this is a crucial part where you're getting to interact with families throughout your community all the time. The church is the same. Like it's with that idea of the Promised Land, the church is the same. You're interacting with your community all the time in a place that you get to bless them. And when we show up with that attitude of, hey, we are blessed, and you can talk about that materially, you can talk about it whatever way, but we are absolutely blessed. I mean, Paul says in Ephesians that we are blessed with every, I don't know if this is Ephesians actually, every spiritual blessing in the heavenly realms. So we have that. And so when we get to sit and say, okay, I'm at the Promised Land, like this is me being in the Promised Land in our culture, that means I show up and I look at everything I get and how do we be a blessing? I encourage my students, hey, every blessing you have, the question becomes, how do I be a blessing? And for me, and I think for our students, to go back to this, we need to disrupt our normalcy in order to get back to that mentality. Like we need a trip. We need a spring break trip where we're going to serve with the hardest service, because when we come back, I've already seen this, and we're going to show up. I meet with my students on Wednesday nights. Today is Tuesday that we're recording this. So tomorrow night, we're going to show up, and it's going to have to be the same encouragement of, hey, we just had a spring break trip, and you're back into your normalcy. What's actually changed? Because we talked about this several times. We asked the question of like, well, what are you going to take away? What's the one commitment that you're making from this trip so that you're not going back to just being the same? Anyways, I'll let you chew on that.
No. No, I definitely wouldn't have taken that there. So that's good. And I mean, you talk about disrupting the normalcy. We leading the Bible study right now at church, and talked about that a couple different times. But here lately, our theme's been just what does it look like to be a man of God, and how passivity is not one of the characteristics of a man of God, and how it's so easy as a man, as a woman, as anybody, any individual, just to get in that rat race of life. Like, I'm just gonna wake up, work, I'm gonna grind there, I'm gonna get a paycheck, I'm gonna come home, I'm gonna feed the kids and family, I'm gonna go to bed, and we're just gonna hit repeat, and we're gonna do it over and over and over again. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think sometimes the devil wants us just to sit in that and to be in that space and just to go through the motions and just get caught in that wheel of life. And sometimes you do need, for your students, like what you're saying, like a spring break trip, to kind of disrupt that. And then you come back, and I think the piece about that is it's challenging. I'm like, now what do we do? Like, how do we walk into every day with a heart of service? How do we change? How do we shift our mindset just a little bit? Because you got a small taste of something that was pretty sweet. It's a taste of this community, of this service, of what the Lord can give us on a daily basis if we would just approach our day with a little bit different outlook. And really just seek him first, right? Which we've talked about a lot. And so, but just talking about passivity and how, I don't know, man, just, my heart is just here lately, my prayers that I wouldn't be a passive, that I wouldn't be passive, that I would be, courageous and bold for the Lord, but that I would also lead my family in such a way too. And so just the overflowing of that. And, I think we live in a culture that is passive aggressive, which is interesting concept as well. But we like to be passive, but then we like to also get our digs where we can, and I think social media is very passive aggressive at times. I think I don't know. It's just I don't know. I'm rambling now, but I'll stop. But just a few thoughts there. Sure.
Yeah. So, in your mind, what is the distinction between passivity and you said courage?
Yeah. Well, it starts with really knowing your identity. We've talked about that previously.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that identity, that my identity is in Christ, and what does that look like, and then really, you know,
Sorry, keep going.
no,
I
you're
forgot
good.
to plug my computer in.
Oh, you're about to down,
Rookie
man.
mistake. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
no, so I think knowing that identity, um, but then standing for what you believe in, not being tossed and turned by just every fad or every every new trend or every new wave. Like I think that's just it, just standing strong. I mean, I think for me, like looking at the Bible and being biblically sound in everything I do, and what the Lord would call us to be, that's hard. Whenever everybody else is doing something different, or everybody's moving in one direction, and you got to go against the grain. So I just and not just going against grain just to go against it, because doing that because you believe and because that's what the Lord's called you to do. So yeah, I think we have spiritually weak homes. I think we there's a lot of men that think being macho and big and strong, and that is what manhood is. I used to be there, but it's more than that. It's your word. It's your yes being your yes, your no being your no. You standing firm on what you believe in, no matter if nobody's watching or everybody's watching you. I think it's really a lot of times what you do behind closed doors will determine that. So, they gave an example in a study we're going through of, and I don't know, I'm not gonna say everybody's seen this, but Chicago. I think there's a video from Chicago, probably all kinds of different cities, but I just think of Chicago. But of a man on the side of the road beating up an elderly woman and taking her stuff, and beside of them are other men videoing it, recording it. And I
Sounds
know,
bad.
yeah, it is. But I mean, and there's different videos like that you've seen, and it's like, are we standing by passively while the world or the devil or the negative things of this world is sweeping our families away, and are we as men just sitting there letting it happen? So are we being passive? Are we not leading? I don't know. It's just that's just been on my heart lately, and it's I don't know. Another thought that comes to mind. My middle child Hadley, the other night, she's very inquisitive. She asks a lot of questions, and I found myself saying, like, you're out of your questions for the day, like you've met your question quota, and that's horrible. I know I shouldn't do that, but sometimes, like,
It's exhausting.
question after question. But the other night she was going to bed, and she's been asking a lot about our middle name. Dad, what's your middle name? Mom, what's your middle name? And so her middle name actually comes from Betsy's middle name before she got married, right? And she's like, why is that not your middle name anymore? So we talk about how the last name, you take the last name of the male and so forth and so on. And she's like, well, what if I want to keep my last name whenever I get married? And I was like, well, it's not the way it is. And she's like, well, why? And of course, the question of why. And I'm like, well, God created the man to be the head of the household. And And so part of that is whenever you get married, the woman takes the man's last name. So it doesn't mean that she's any less in the relationship. She keeps her family's name as her middle name to carry that on. Um, and I threw this off of just base. I mean, I've done no research on this, but I mean, it's biblically, right? Like this is kind of where we are. And she's like, well, what if I want to keep my last name? Can the woman not leave the household? I said, no. Like a lot of women do leave their household, and they lead alongside their husband, and then some just leave because the husband or the male is just a wash up. And just a knot on the log. I said, and it's unfortunate. I said, but yes, it's like the way the family is created is for the man to lead the household, the wife to come along, and she's a huge part of that, and they're a team. They're together. They work together. But that's what it looks like. And so I left that conversation, and Betsy was at the bottom steps. I walked down. She was like, "You did a good job answering that." I was like, "I don't know," but then I looked at her and I said, "But you know what? If I'm not leading my house the way that I just mentioned to my daughter, none of that makes sense. If I am that passive leader in the home, and I haven't, I mean, I'm not perfect. I'm not saying that, but that's what I strive to do. But if I'm a wash up dad, first off, I'm not there to have that conversation with my daughter. Second off, that conversation doesn't make sense because she looks at me and says, "You don't really do anything. Mom does it all." So I don't know. Like I said, just passivity, Are we being passive? As men of God, we're not called to be passive. Doesn't mean you gotta be the loudest. Doesn't mean you have to stand on the mountaintop and scream from the mountaintops. I think some of the strongest godly men I've met have been some of the quietest men. But by their actions, by what they do, by what they show up for, and by what they show out for whenever the time comes. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll say something since we're on the conversation that you had with Hadley. But I think it's fascinating. There's so much pride as a man, as for me personally, the fact that my wife Amber took my last name. There's such pride in that too. It's not just it matters to the man, I think, I don't, that's all I want to say is it really matters. And there's pride to be able to say like, yeah, she took my name and it's not mine anymore. It's ours. We get to own it. We get to make the family now. But man, that's like such a gift. Anyways, I'll digress on that because that's another point, but I just think it's important to understand that, and it's important for me to understand that when we're having that conversation.
Right.
But
I've never thought about it, to be honest with you. I've never really thought through. I know that happens, right? Because I've always it's a tradition, right? Like that's just what we do. But that my first grader would bring it up and bring it to light, and then me and my wife having conversations around it because it's a partnership. Like to me, it doesn't matter if she takes my last name or not, but but I do believe that that's the way. That's the way it needs to be.
yeah.
But it means something, right? And she wants to know why. And sometimes I think those little things we forget, and it's a partnership. It's two becoming one. You marrying those two. Like I have 3 daughters, right? So everybody always says, "Oh, you're gonna have a son. Oh, you're gonna have a son." Carry on the family name, that kind of stuff, and we're not. That's not in the cards for us, unless something crazy happens. But really thinking through that, like my daughters will, I'll leave a legacy through them, whether the last name continues or not, because I hope I raise up strong and courageous girls that'll go out there and love the Lord and love people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Passivity. And I asked that a little bit. You talk about just especially within the home, but I've been chewing on this a lot. I think we actually mentioned maybe last episode, I talked about David and waiting, but just the idea of when David's anointed king, if you read the story of David, he's anointed king, and the next thing he does is goes back to his sheep. And then he shows up, he kills Goliath, and shoot, he could have taken over the kingdom then. He doesn't. And he just continues waiting. And that's, I think we're often invited into that type of waiting. But waiting's very active. And so I've been chewing on just this idea of what's passive and what's active. And here's where I'm going. I think to be active, it may not look active to most of the world, but maybe there's a couple things that it truly requires. And you hit on both of them, I think. But the first is it takes incredible clarity. Like you need, even just being able to say, you being there for this conversation. You had no idea this conversation was about to happen with your daughter. But the clarity it took to be there, like it's a priority for you to be not only a dad in your family, but by the time it's time to put your girls down for bed, you want to be there. And you want to be helping put them down for bed and tucking them in, and whether you're praying over them, singing songs, whatever you're doing at that point, like it's a priority for you to be there, and you've clarified that priority. Intentionally or unintentionally, you have.
Yeah, sometimes my wife drags me up a step, so just yeah.
I have those nights. I
Come on,
I think I understand.
Girls ain't going to bed till you get up here. Oh, get on it.
Yeah, well, I look at my wife all the time like, oh, you want bedtime? Oh, I want it. I say, okay.
Yeah.
But, man, yeah.
Yes, no, I mean,
but it's...
Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, it's a priority, and you've clarified that priority, and so you make the time to be there, and that enables that to happen, enables that conversation to happen.
And so, we're definitely not sticking with the thing we talked about today, but this is good. Like, no. I something that's kept coming to my mind lately, and it kind of ties directly into this. Like, good things, great things, they don't just happen, and I think we know that, but like, you gotta work and you gotta grind and you gotta keep doing the things that you need to do, even on the days you don't want to do them. On those days where you're up all night with a sick kid and all these things happen, like we still go through our bedtime routine because we know that it's important. First off, it gets everybody to sleep quicker, so then everybody's happier because then we get to go to bed. But like there's power in that, and it's like we pray every night, we do certain things where we hit that rhythm, but there's sweetness that comes from that through constantly staying in that rhythm. And we talked about disrupting things and getting out of kind of our normalcy at times, and that can be good, but there's also good things whenever you set good priorities, whenever you do those things, like waking up in the morning to get and either to exercise, devotions, those kind of things. Like you gotta hit those things, and sometimes it's grinding through them, and it's in that waiting period that you're still being obedient to the things you need to be obedient to, that leads to a season of plenty, a season where you can ripe, where the harvest is ripe and you can harvest the fruit. I just think of gardening. I think of anything. Here recently, so softball season's kicked off, and everyone's in the throes of transitioning into 10U softball, which is a big deal. It's a big transition. You go from a coach pitch to kid pitch, and all the feels of standing up there in the box and being worried about getting hit by a ball because the coach isn't laying it right in there, and all these things. Learning to pitch. She's wanting to pitch a little bit, and we were just throwing around warming up before one of the games. She hasn't gotten to pitch in a game yet this season. She did last season, and she kind of slumped her head and walked off. And I said, "Sweetheart, like what's up?" She's like, "I'm just not a great pitcher." I said, "You're not." And she kind of perked up at me, and I said, well, let's talk about it for a minute. I said, I'm not being rude, I'm not being ugly, but let's be honest. How much time and effort have you put into this? Like, outside of practice, how much time and effort? She says, I guess not much. I said, yeah. I said, we threw one bucket of balls outside of practice over the past 2 weeks. I said, so what do you expect? Like what is your expectation? You said you want to just show up and be great. I said, that's not how it works, sweetheart. I said, like, and one of the other girls on our team, she's a good pitcher, but she's also committed, some time to it, like a couple of, outside of practice, an hour a day or so. Like, she goes and throws a little bit. I said, like, if you want to be great at this, like, you have to grind and you got to put in the work equity in order to do that. I said, now, if you don't, that's fine. Like, no harm, no foul. I don't care. Like, if you don't want to bitch, like then focus on something else. But focus, like, whatever you want to focus on, put it in. But you're gonna have to grind, and you're gonna have to put in the work, and then the fruit will come. And it may not come as quickly as what you like. So just in looking at that, I think sometimes through the waiting, like bringing back what you're talking about, through the waiting, you're still obedient. You still are drawing closer to the Lord. You're still doing what He's called you to do. You're not forsaking those things just because you're waiting. So there's action in that. You're still accelerating in those spaces so that whenever He does lay before you and that clarity things become clear and the vision and direction become clear, you're ready to go. I don't know, just a conversation. Sunday with my child, so.
Well, I think it's Aristotle has a quote that says, "We are what we repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence is not an act, but a habit." And I actually really love that quote because I think it speaks to the consistency. I actually love that you brought that up because we talked about disrupting our normalcy, which is important. And I think we even can develop the rhythm of disrupting our normalcy every period, but that doesn't need to be every day. The idea of every day, every week even, is you're not setting aside the time, you're developing the rhythms that you can stack on each other, you can build on each other to create the consistency of life. The consistency of showing up, the consistency of being present, the consistency of doing the hard things, doing the slow things, the consistency of, I think one of the biggest killers of impact, period, of quality impact, I should say, of godly impact, is distraction and busyness. And how many times, you and I even have this conversation of like, hey, how you doing? Busy. Yeah, and we are. We're doing busy jobs that can easily get to that. And yet, that's the biggest killer often of just having a really deep impact. And so, to bring that around, you're talking about, Evelyn and putting in the effort, which I love. That you would be teaching that,
and it's not even effort; it's work.
Right.
Well, I want to because like effort, she goes out and gives 100% of her effort, but that doesn't mean she's got
during game day
the skill set to.
Yeah. And you're right. So I have a little circle that I use. That the last spot, the third spot, is outcomes, which we think in terms of outcomes. Evelyn, the outcome she wants is to be a great pitcher. That's an outcome. Ultimately, we don't have that much power over outcomes when you think about it. Even as a pitcher, like you hold your thought because I see your wheels turning. But to be a great pitcher, you've got to pitch. But once that ball's out of your hand, it is going where it's going, and it's going to do what it's going to do. You can't control it once it's out of your hand. And so what you can control is your outputs, and that's what leads to outcomes. So it feels like we can control outcomes, if you will, but you can control what you're outputting. So just in the motion of a softball pitch, the output is how you're letting the ball go, with what velocity, what rotation you may be putting on the ball, all those things. But even in this idea with Evelyn, the output is just showing up and putting in the practice. And if she wants to be a great pitcher, learning to, okay, I want to throw X amount of balls per day, that could be the output she does. The outcome then she'll become a great pitcher because the more you do it, the better you're going to be doing it well as well. But I think often we think about the outputs, but we don't think about the inputs necessary to be able to create those outputs. So even just stick with this example, Evelyn, the inputs necessary may just simply be the time that she needs, setting aside that time so that she can throw so many balls. This is all assuming she decides to be a pitcher. I don't know that she wants to. But, two, it would be getting the people around her. Having the right people, because you've never thrown a softball pitch in your life, except for slow pitch maybe. Yeah. And so, finding the right people, you can do so much, but you might need better coaches than what you could do in that situation. The list goes on of what inputs. But I love that, and the reason I bring it up is because it's helped me think more clearly, because every time you set a goal, for me, the goal, if you're doing a SMART goal, most of the time it's an outcome-oriented goal. But if you're not making the moves backwards to say, okay, well, what outputs do I need to possibly hit that goal? Okay, this is what I need. Well, then what's the inputs that I need? What do I need to be putting into myself to be able to create the outputs that could possibly create the outcome that I'm looking for?
And we'll call that in education backwards design thinking. So you start with your standard or goal that you want kids to learn, and then you work backwards. You say, well, what do I need to teach to get there? So, like if this is the skill or the standard that I need to teach the kids, and this is what I want them to be able to do, then what are the steps I need to do to get there, or teaching pieces I need to get there? And then what kind of resources do I need, which is what you're talking about. So you're talking about, now we got to gather all of our resources, our materials, our content. And once the teacher gathers all that content, they can then teach those specific skills explicitly, model, show them, let them do it, and then repeat that process maybe through 3 or 4 different skill sets. And then you get your outcome that you're looking for them to know the overall standard. It's the same kind of concept, just a little bit different language.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so it's backwards design. You set the goal, and then you say, all right, what strategically do I need to do to get there? And who do I need? And what expertise do I need? And what knowledge do I need? Or what time do I need? Is it just time? Is it just repetition? Is it, it's good.
Yeah. Well, I bring that up because we were talking about, passive and active. And I often think our waiting is really for the outcome. We, as followers of Christ, recognize, hey, we don't really have that much control over the outcome, but God does. I mean, that's one of the foundational beliefs of following Christ is, hey, He's overcome the world, so take heart. We're going to bring it to Him and let Him do the work. So we wait for Him, to really fulfill that outcome, but that doesn't mean we're not doing the outputs. It doesn't mean we're not doing the inputs. We're not being active in those things. We're not doing the planning necessary. We're not doing the hard work, the inward work necessary. We're developing the character. Like, all that's very active in our waiting, in our expectation even, as we, pursue the Lord and pursue His outcomes. And so, just to bring that tension of, yeah, we want to disrupt the normalcy, but we're also here and we're kind of in this, we want to be active and not be passive. So part of that's just even developing the thinking. Because let me ask you this. Hopefully this is not, but how often have you used this backwards thinking in your home?
Well, with our family goals, I'd say we've, that's helped, right? Like, that's something we've talked about. It's happened since this podcast has started that you kind of challenged me to do. And, we actually just revisited those this weekend on the car ride home. Or we were going somewhere, to and from somewhere, and everybody was just being ugly and rude to each other. And I was like, hey, what's our family values? What do we set those up to being? And we were like, nothing crazy. We just talked to them again. So what do they mean? Let's make sure we're doing that. But before that, very rare. I don't know. I just feel like it's definitely lacking. But, whenever you talk about it, like being, you talk about what does a a passive somebody, like what's the opposite of a passive man? What does a godly man look like? And how does, well, you set goals for your family. You set goals for yourself so that you can be better for your family. And sometimes I know that as men, we think we can do that at work, but we don't do it at home, or we don't do it personally because we think it's silly, or we think, oh, we're too good for that, or who sits down and does that? Oh, somebody may call it journaling, whatever. Like, it's that pride. Like, oh, I got this. I don't even got to worry about it. But putting pen to paper is super powerful, because whenever you write it, it becomes reality. You can think a lot of things, but I believe whenever you write it out, it becomes reality. And if you write out, this is what I need to work on, and you put it up somewhere and you have to look at it daily, it's a constant reminder. And I think we get in that busyness of life and we forget about the things that are most important at times until they're gone. And we're like, man, I wish I would have, right? Or until something happens to where you realize, oh, things are on the rocks. Now I need to focus on this, and now it's a harder climb. So I don't know. Like, no, that's a great question. I think everybody needs to ask that. Like, how are we using this backwards design in our households? How are we using it in the spaces in our life that are most important to us? How are we using it in our spiritual walk? I think it's a good question.
Yeah, and I asked that question very. It's challenging to me. Let's put it that way, because I'm the same way. Before this year, it's like, I don't know that I ever did that. And now that I've started to articulate these thoughts even in my head, it's like, well, how often am I working through this with my children? Even in a small way. Like, actually, you say it's tough to see these sometimes, but what you did with Evelyn really was at least partially that, when you talked about putting in the work and putting in the grind. That is that. But yeah, it's challenging to me, because it's like, I don't think through this intentionally with my family, for sure. And yet, when we talk about priorities, we've talked about this a few times on this podcast, and God's first, and then it's family, church. We've talked a little bit about that, whether it's church first, family first, or if there's one or above the other. So, but family and church are right there, and yet we show up to both of those pretty passively. And I say we, basically saying myself, and I'm guessing most people would be included in that.
Yeah, well, I think we all could do better.
Yeah, and I bring that up like it's a challenge, but it's not that hard to do better. Because sometimes it just feels exhausting to be like, well, I show up to work every day, and I got to do this. It's just making a little space, and we can make space.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I know we're getting close to time.
That's good stuff.
You got plenty more things to unpack from this, and it's funny how sometimes whenever we come up with a plan, it just doesn't go that way. And I was feeling like that was going to happen this morning, but so we say that next time.
That's right. Well, now we have a plan for next time.
That's right. Well, man,
this was good,
man. It's been fun. We got kids that run to school and different things. So, guys, if you're listening to this, we hope you're getting value out of the content, and if you are, share it with others. We look forward to this. This is fun for us, just to get on here and be able to share our heart and talk a little bit. It's actually fun for me just to be able to get to talk to my buddy here. We don't talk often, but this has been good. So
yeah, this has been good, dude. Appreciate you so much.
Yeah, man.
And I'll just reiterate, share it if you like it. We would really appreciate that. Leave a review as well. That would be helpful. So, all right, man.
All right. Have a good day.
Well, we'll have to get going. You too.
See you, man.
We'll see you later.
Yeah.